Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months.
Go to Bull Fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, director, a video about the trenches. That isn't fun. That isn't sexy. Well, it's important, so sit down! Because if there's one constant with Jim Harbaugh, everywhere he goes, he finds success. And I personally am starting to believe it's because he sticks to the fundamentals of what works. And the biggest thing that a lot of teams seem to forget or don't prioritize is building in the trenches. The offensive line, the defensive line. This is where games are won. And Jim Harbaugh has understood that everywhere he's went, man. The work that this man has done to provide his teams with the highest of quality in terms of those positions is absolutely filthy, resulting in a large amount to his national championship last season with Michigan, but you can date all the way back to his San Diego days. This man knows how to run the football. This man knows how to build in the trenches, and he understands that those fundamentals are what leads to success in the NFL. So today, we're going to do it, man. We're going to take a big bite out of crime. We're going to take a big bite out of what has been ignored or not given the limelight enough on social media, but throughout the fans. We're going to highlight the trenches of the Chargers and what I believe is going to be affected by the Jim Harbaugh effect this season. Everybody's going to be benefited from this. It's almost like when you take a certain character in a video game or a coach in like Madden or something that can help elevate your team. That's the kind of effect that Jim Harbaugh is going to have, but I would say more particularly in the trenches. You're going to see that position receive some attention, and we have already seen that as soon as our first round pick this last year. So we're going to highlight the big boys in today's video, and it is an important topic, y'all. This is the future of our team. This is the future of our identity, and it'd be a really good idea to start putting our gaze on what's going to be, ultimately the identity of this squad in 2024. Before we do kick off, guys, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $250. Newcomers, take a look at the special on screen. Great way to support the channel and have some fun along the way. Before we do kick off, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, the small amount of time you guys take to the like, sub, and a bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action. Next level trenches. It's time to highlight the big boys in this video. I mean, I've always had, a soft spot for a little limelight for the big boys, being a big boy myself. Would love to see more love shined on the position. I think that's what Jim Harbaugh is trying to do throughout the sport of football. Let's get these guys the attention they deserve, because if there's one thing that you hear from Coach a lot is that we really do prioritize offensive line. We weaponize them. We use them as weapons on this team, because that really is ultimately what he views as the win or loss factor in a lot of different situations. And it really does apply to like real life. Like philosophies behind Jim Harbaugh and what he values as a priority needs to be listened to us by fans, by his players, by his staff, and it's one big reason why this particular hire is so important. There's a lot of ownership out there. There's a lot of, front offices out there that would really not put forth the effort for that kind of singular vision. Jim Harbaugh is one of the kind of hires, one of the rare kind of hires you'll see in the NFL that will take control and find his vision, not just, from himself, but from the very top, stemming all the way down to the janitorial, people at SoFi or whatever. Everybody's of the same vision, and Jim Harbaugh knows what he's doing. He has found success everywhere he's gone, and I truly do believe it's because of the trenches build. Okay, so we're going to start highlighting some players. These are just some guys that I've been thinking about in terms of what are they going to look like this year because Jim Harbaugh is part of the equation. What are they going to look like in this system? Greg Roman's also a part of this, right? You got Nick Hardwick in there, in terms of offensive line coaching. This really does feel like it's going to turn a huge corner as soon as this season. There's some things where I'm like, hey, it's going to take time. We need more cap. We need more draft. We got to start building towards the vision of Jim Harbaugh as far as the team, roster construction. But there are some things where I'm like, it's going to kick, man. It's going to kick in this season. It's going to hit. You're going to see an obvious change, and offensive line and defensive line play are going to be big ones. Okay, one big beneficiary the Chargers do have this season is revolving around their first-round pick, Joe Alt. The Chargers have, in fact, got the best offensive line position player that we've seen in a long time, right? Penei Sewell was probably going to be the biggest one prior to Joe Alt, but it's been some years since then, right? He's already on to his next contract, I think. Joe Alt absolutely stood above the rest in what was an extremely impressive draft class of offensive linemen. This was probably the deepest draft that I've ever seen as an NFL fan in terms of offensive line. They were everywhere. And the Chargers ended up picking the top of the top, which really does say something. You're going to see a lot of, mid-first rounders, second rounders, third rounders elevate to, I'm not going to say star status because these are offensive linemen, but, top, players at their position in the league. Very, very good draft. And to think of what Joe Alt is going to provide the Chargers, being the best of the best, being one of the best that we've seen, is very exciting. And then you go ahead and inject that with the crazy, superpower that is Jim Harbaugh effect. I think we're going to see something very cool out of Joe Alt. Now, this season is going to be very different than previous seasons. The whole idea around how the Chargers are blocking, the kind of system that they'll be running, it's very much so more, we'll even say violent. It's tough. It's rough. And Joe Alt does fit the criteria that he really does fit anywhere. Let's be honest. No matter where he was drafted, he was going to be one of the best offensive linemen on that team, if not the best offensive lineman on that team immediately. He's fast. He's agile. He's extremely strong. He's huge. He's pretty much system proof. But the Chargers, who are trying to usher in this rough, tough, new ground and pound, old style or old school style of football, Joe Alt was a great way to begin building towards that dream. And behind Jim Harbaugh, and this is kind of the big reason, we'll take a little time on Joe Alt, and then we'll probably go a little bit quicker with some of the other guys here. One of the biggest reasons why I want to put these positions in front of your guys' eyes, to push the attention onto them, is because of all of the potential that they carry as individual players, plus the effect of Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh has been so good at extracting the very best version possible out of these position groups. And most of the time, it's resulted into, we'll say, some overperformance, right? Like, you underestimate what these guys can do until Jim gets their hands on them. But when you hand him a player that's already impressive, that's already top of the top, right? What's going to happen then? I think Joe Alt could end up being, I'm going to say it right now, a top 5 or even 3 right tackle in the league in his rookie season. I think he's got Pro Bowl written all over him. And I do think when you add Jim Harbaugh to the equation, it becomes that much more exciting. And Joe Alt could end up being the tip of the spear. I think that's how Jim says it, right? The tip of the spear in terms of our run game, too, as far as the blocking is concerned. Gus, Isaiah, JK, Kamani, all these guys are really, really, really going to benefit from his, not just his strength, but his size and his speed on the right side. Joe Alt is going to be a huge, huge part of this offense. And for the entirety of the Jim Harbaugh era and beyond, I'm very excited to see him get to work. Now, one guy that hasn't received a whole lot of limelight, a whole lot of attention is Ben Mason. I want to put the limelight firmly on Ben Mason for a second here, because this is a player, when you're talking about players that are getting overlooked, I think Ben Mason should be one of near the top, right? The Chargers haven't really utilized a fullback to their full potential since Lorenzo Neal, right? Derek Watt had his moments. We're hoping for, Xander Horvath, and there was Neighbors. The fullback position hasn't been one firmly utilized in a while because the Chargers just haven't been that kind of running style football team in a while. The Anthony Lynn days did see a little bit of work because that was his system, that was his deal. But outside of that, fullback has been largely forgotten, not just by the Chargers, but the NFL and as a whole, right? The Chargers are going to be one of those old school teams that are very much so going to prioritize and utilize the fullback position. And this is actually a player that I had my eyes on well before the Chargers picked him up via free agency because of his connections to Jim Harbaugh, not just through his brother John at the Baltimore Ravens, which was Ben Mason's previous team, but also being, an ex-Michigan Wolverine under the coaching of Jim Harbaugh is certainly not going to hurt his chances at making the Bolts. So the connections alone we're already, putting my attention on what's going to happen with Ben Mason. Is he going to become a Charger? And then ultimately he did, right? He did become a Charger. Now what? What do we have in Ben Mason? Why is it so important that Ben Mason succeed and that it works? Well, it's because the Chargers, you're going to see I form. You're going to see, strong and weak formations with that tight end in there being a pretty important piece to the puzzle. He's going to be one of those, unspoken heroes, much like the offensive lineman that brings us success on the ground. And I don't know if we've had a superstar or even star or even, recognizable fullback since Lorenzo Neal. I think we're moving back into that position. You think about Jim Harbaugh's systems and the kind of running style he likes. Fullback very much so is important there. And Ben Mason, to me, has a lot of talent that we just don't know about. And it's because his introduction into the NFL was via the Baltimore Ravens, who already had Patrick Ricard, one of the best fullbacks in the NFL. Ultimately, Ben Mason did not make the roster because, surprise, surprise, he couldn't beat out Patrick Ricard for the starting position on the team. Now we see Ben Mason, who has already played for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, make his debut with the Los Angeles Chargers. And I think that Ben Mason's going to be a sneaky elevating name or a name that climbs the position group over the next few years. I know there's not a lot of stardom out there, right? You got Kyle Juszczyk, you got Patrick Ricard, you got a couple of guys here and there that, do have a bit of attention at fullback. But I think Ben Mason's going to be among some of the more respected because he'll also be utilized enough to gain that kind of traction. And I think his blocking skills are definitely up to par. I think he's going to be more of a utility fullback as well, where you're going to see him involved in the passing game a little bit, right? He's going to be that hybrid tight end fullback sort of player. I really do think that Ben Mason, the name Ben Mason, may end up being one that Chargers fans recognize at least, a few weeks into the season and be like, wow, we're really using this fullback. He's making some space for Dobbins and for Gus. Like, this could be very exciting to see what Ben Mason turns into for this team. It's a very unappreciated position, but it's one that's going to be very important to the success of this particular system. All right? Next up, another player, man, that I'm very excited to see the elevation. This is one of the prime examples, and there's a couple of them on this list. This is one of the prime examples of what I'm looking for the Jim Harbaugh effect. Right? Bradley Bozeman. You take a look at his career most recently with the Carolina Panthers, right? Largely okay, right? He had average, if not even below average, center in the NFL. If you're just looking at, the stats of his offense and what he could help produce, like the Carolina Panthers, if we're being honest, was a mess last year. One of the more disorganized and dysfunctional offenses in the entire league, despite having a young studly quarterback. It's not going to help you when the rest of your team is in shambles and pretty much still in rebuild mode. Bradley Bozeman was the center of that offense. Okay, not the centerpiece, but like the center of the position. And he struggled. I'm not going to lie. There was some struggle out there. And I do think a lot of it does have to do with the dysfunction of the Carolina Panthers offense. However, you take a look, and this is why the Jim Harbaugh effect is so exciting and impressive. You take a look at what he has heralded so far in terms of what the coaches are saying, what we're seeing in practice, what we're seeing in the offseason. Bradley Bozeman's one of those guys that's turning heads, man. Like, all of a sudden, we went from, me personally as a fan, when he was first announced as a free agent acquisition, I was like, all right, we got our bridge center, for the next couple of years while the Chargers try and go out there and draft somebody. I was hoping for Jackson Powers Johnson, Cedric Van Pran. There's a lot of guys out there that I was excited about in this draft. And the Chargers decided to stick with Bradley Bozeman instead. It was kind of shocking for me, if I'm being honest. I'm like, wow, we passed up on some really nice talent and a really good, offensive line draft, and we're sticking with Bradley Bozeman. I viewed that as a mistake. I felt it was underwhelming. But as the offseason, went on, and as we heard more from the coaches and read more about what's going on at camp, Bradley Bozeman is one of the highlight players. He looks like he could be the answer. Not just the bridge player, but the answer for the next couple of seasons. And that's what I think Jim Harbaugh helped bring to the table. Not only did Bozeman exit a pretty bad situation in terms of the Carolina Panthers offense, but he also entered a very good situation where the Chargers are very much going to elevate his talent, and Jim Harbaugh in particular is going to get the best version out of him. We're hearing some pretty great things. Bradley Bozeman, who can't, again, I don't want to paint him as like he was so terrible with the Carolina Panthers. He was like average, maybe even below average as far as the stats are reading. But he can be a very good pass protector. I want to see more in terms of what the Chargers have in mind for him in the run blocking department. But Bradley Bozeman, he does have the makings to be a very good center. And I think the Chargers are one of the best situations that he could have been brought into. And I think Jim Harbaugh is already starting to show his influence there by what we're hearing in Bozeman's performance in the offseason. It really is quite impressive. Speaking of guys that Harbaugh is kind of talking up and we're starting to hear things, right? And I'm about to see it in real life, right? I'm heading to training camp here in a couple of weeks to go watch this for myself. But Scott Matlock, this dude has been elevated in terms of attention from the coaching staff, from the fans. We've been hearing some beat writers talk about him. This is a dude that I think is listed as a starter for the Chargers as of right now. I think in the line it's Puna and Scott Matlock. And Matlock brings a couple of different things to the table that I do appreciate. He's a pretty decent pass rusher from the interior. Again, got to wait and see what the run blocking department or the run stopping department looks like. But Scott Matlock does have the chops as far as being a leader, too. We've heard a lot of really good things about his leadership on that line, his speaking with action, and it just really does feel like he's the kind of personality you want on the line. That's not enough for a lot of people. I'll include myself there. I mean, personality can only take you so far. Let's see that in action with your talent as well. And right now it does feel like in terms of year 2 leaps, Scott Matlock might be, or I should say next year leap, the 2024 leap in terms of improvement. Scott Matlock really is one of those players that is being talked about. And it's a position that the Chargers need to get right. Jim Harbaugh mentioned in an interview a couple of weeks ago that when entering the situation with the Chargers, he was excited about the offensive line because of Slater, because of Zion and these guys, but he wasn't too sure about the defensive line. And lo and behold, it turns out that the defensive line is a strength of the team, per his words. That's what Jim Harbaugh has said. Maybe guys like Scott Matlock have helped unlock that for Coach Harbaugh. Maybe Scott Matlock is taking that leap, and it would be very cool to see that happen because as we're seeing guys like, Morgan Fox get towards the end of their contracts with the Chargers, we're going to need to see other guys step up, and I think Scott Matlock could end up being sort of that for the Chargers in the future. Speaking of trenches, we got to lump these guys in there, right? The tight end. This is a position that I am so excited to watch blossom and unfold in the Jim Harbaugh era. Jim Harbaugh's had some pretty cool tight ends in his career, pretty much wherever he's gone. And it does feel like some of them have come out of nowhere. It does feel like some of them are as a result of really good recruiting, really good drafting by the Niners. I think it was previous, right? Vernon Davis, previous Jim Harbaugh, if I do remember correctly. There's been some good tight ends historically in a Jim Harbaugh-led team. The Chargers right now I would view as one of those teams that still needs a little bit of work at tight end, but that's the thing. Jim Harbaugh is going to find a way to make these guys, not number one, elevated, but number two, getting them more involved than we're used to as Chargers fans of the last decade, right? It's been a while since Antonio Gates was that dude you see, out there picking up every pass, first down, touchdown from Phillip Rivers. That's the last time I can remember that tight end position being super, super solid. Hunter Henry was good. He was good for a while there too, and Phillip Rivers, and I think the early Justin Herbert days. But we're waiting for that big name, the next big name at tight end. Till then, by the way, it's Colson Loveland. By the way, till then, the other guys in the roster I do see as not someone you want to underestimate. Hayden Hurst is probably, again, one of the best examples on this list of what's going to happen once Jim Harbaugh gets his hands on him. Because of the, lack of involvement maybe from previous systems, we maybe have never seen the best version of Hayden Hurst in the past. Hayden Hurst is going to see a lot of attention this year. He is tight end 1 as of right now. That could change, but as of right now, he looks to be the guy. He looks like he's going insane in camp. He looks like a premium receiver at tight end. But again, that's just training camp or the off season. Once you get him in a Jim Harbaugh offense, a Greg Roman offense, however, on game day and where it counts, right, in the season, I do think you're going to see a lot of involvement from Hayden Hurst. You're going to see his pass blocking skills at work, but more likely, I think you're going to see his pass receiving skills at work, where he has been shining, and Jim Harbaugh does find opportunities to get these guys the ball. You're going to see a lot of tight ends on the field. When you're running the ball as much as what we're expecting the Chargers to run, you're going to see those tight ends out there as extra blockers more often than not. You're going to see especially Will Dissly in that position. However, that does open up opportunities to have a running look while also throwing in a play action to the tight end. And you're going to see that, I'm going to tell you guys right now, you're going to see that so much this season. And Hayden Hurst is at the top of the list of beneficiaries to benefit from that sort of look. And the Chargers are going to be a tight end team for a while. Right now, it's Hayden Hurst. Colston Loveland could be coming in next season, which I'm geeking out over already. But there is a lot of work to do at the position. But as of right now, I think the Chargers are very good. Like, we're very solid, and I think we're going to see a lot of hidden potential unearthed from a guy like Hayden Hurst. I think Hurst is going to have a career year with the Chargers. He only has the 1-year contract with us. Maybe he does find, an extension, but I would more likely think that he's going to serve as, an example of what can happen when the tight end position is put into a good position to succeed behind Harbaugh and Roman. Now, maybe the best example, can you guys guess? You guys are not going to get it. Can you guys guess the best example in terms of player on this list that I think Jim Harbaugh and his effect is going to benefit? If he makes the roster, that is. I'm going to go ahead and say it, man. I think this poor man right here, this poor man, by the name of Alex Leatherwood, former first-round pick for the, was it the Oakland Raiders back then? That definitely did not help his case. The Raiders were not in a good spot. I think he was overdrafted as well. I think a lot of people viewed him more as a second-round pick, but largely considered today a bust. Alex Leatherwood was a head-scratcher when announced to the Chargers as a new free agent acquisition. This is where it kind of counts for me, man. If Jim Harbaugh and his team and Nick Hardwick and all these guys, right, can get their hands on a player like Alex Leatherwood, and I'm not saying I need him to go out there and be Trent Williams, right? I'm not saying he needs to go out there and be Penei Sewell, but if we can get Alex Leatherwood out there and to be a solid swing tackle, which right now it's kind of looking like what that's gonna be the case, I'll be very impressed. As of right now, I don't know who the swing tackle is. I'm still kind of thinking it's Trey Hipkins, but Pip looks like he's moving, right, to guard. It feels like the signing of Alex Leatherwood was with the intention of becoming a swing tackle. I really honestly feel like if Jim Harbaugh has a plan for Alex Leatherwood that does succeed, that's all the proof you would ever need. To take an NFL player that was largely labeled a bust, that has underperformed everywhere he's been, despite his first-round pedigree, I think he could do it to anybody. I think Jim Harbaugh could be the guru that is for real in the NFL as far as trench positions are concerned. So Alex Leatherwood, I'm gonna plant my flag there. I think Alex Leatherwood, I think he can make the roster, and I think he could surprise people in terms of what he's actually capable of doing. Hopefully we don't need to see the services of a swing tackle very often, but if he can do it for Alex Leatherwood, he could do it for anybody. Another player that I need to highlight, because I have been doing a terrible job at highlighting his potential with the team, Justin Aboigbe. This is a player that at the time I felt was drafted a bit too high. He wasn't really even on my radar. I felt the Chargers, had other positions that they wanted to attack in the 4th round. But lo and behold, we hear the name. And the very next thing I remember seeing was the camera cutting over to the Chargers war room and Jim Harbaugh literally like punching the air like, yeah, baby, let's go. This is a Jim Harbaugh guy. All right, Jim Harbaugh, who's fresh off of the chaos that is college football, knows of Justin Aboigbe, and he wanted him on this football team very evidently. Okay? Even if guys like me, level fans that don't have the depth necessary to understand the move, if we're not impressed, it doesn't mean that it's not good for the team. And to see Jim Harbaugh's reaction and to see what he has planned does get me excited for what he could bring to the team. Justin Aboigbe, if there was one thing I could tell you guys when I was watching Aboigbe's highlights and starting to look at whatever film or read up on him, one of the biggest things that stuck out to me as a fan was his strength. The dude is crazy strong. And I do feel like that's a big part of the Jim Harbaugh identity. You want to be tough. You want to be, big. You want to be strong. It feels like Justin Aboigbe does fit and check all those criteria. And honestly, he can be a really heck of a good pass rusher too, if developed right, with Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Morgan Fox. It feels like there's a lot of potential there. Jim Harbaugh was excited for a reason. I got excited as soon as I started seeing his raw strength and talent. I do think that it's somebody that the Chargers could end up calling upon this year, especially if he's good against the run. The Chargers could find more use for him this season. I think him and another player on this list, maybe I'll actually switch over to him. So I'm going to actually jump over to him real quick. Could end up making a very good duo if they're good versus the run. Tito Abbe is a player that we've hoped to see more from, right, in his career. He's just not been available. Largely unavailable because of injury. Ben Herbert's going to be a big part of this team this year, and if he can help a guy like Tito stay on the field, I'm excited to see what happens. But Tito can be a very good run defender. That's why we need him. Chargers not a good run defending team. That's why we're all kind of hoping we would see some talent via the draft that's a little bit more reputable in terms of stopping the run. Boogby can get there, right? But Tito is certainly going to be a player we hope to see return to the fold as a guy that can help us versus the run. And when you line him up with other guys that are decent versus the run, you know, Okoye and maybe even Puna, you could see that position perform at least at average this season. That's all I'm hoping for as a Chargers fan. Can we at least be an average run block or run defending defense? That's all I'm looking for. So Tito's going to be another guy I'm looking for a big Jim Harbaugh effect this season. Of course, Jesse Minter deserving a lot of credit there too. He's going to be a big reason why the trenches are are among some of the best in the NFL this year. And I'm going to say the edge position. The Chargers, I think, are going to end the season as the best pass rushing team in the NFL. Okay. Another player to kind of highlight lightly, Christopher Hinton, who has largely been a practice squad guy, a depth option for the Chargers. I think could see a little bit more of a role now that Jim Harbaugh is here. And of course, it's because he did play for Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. And you know what? Christopher Hinton has had his flashes, right? And that's a big part of the Jim Harbaugh effect that I absolutely love. Flashes exist with a large majority of players, right? That's the reason why you draft them to begin with. You know, lots of flashes from Tito, flashes from Hayden Hurst, right, in his career. We saw plenty of flashes with Scott Matlock. We saw a couple of really nice plays in terms of pass rush, right? Flashes from Bradley Bozeman. Like, these players flash, right? Jim Harbaugh is really good at, you know, bringing that out of a player as not just a flash, but the norm. Not just a flash in the pan anymore. It's there. It's real. And it's constant, right? The consistency is now there with the flash. And that is something I think is very exciting when you think about Jim Harbaugh and his understanding at a deep level of these players. It's going to be exciting. Another player that I'm actually really excited to see what the potential is here, man. CJ Okoye has been a player that has made some moves, right? You guys remember that play. You guys remember the dance. CJ Okoye has had some moments. And I think part of the international player program, he was one that Chargers fans were pretty excited for, and largely I would say it was a very successful move by the Bolts. Now we have to wonder what's going to go on because of Praise Olatoke is how I think you say his name, probably fulfilling that position. Does CJ Okoye still make the cut? I think he does, because he does fill that body type that you're kind of looking for, and I also feel like he does have the strength and the run blocking that could be elevated to a point where the Chargers do utilize him in those certain situations. I'm very excited to see CJ Okoye. And CJ Okoye is no slouch in terms of pass rush either. I think that we've seen some big plays from him in the past too. So again, players that flash are going to be players that could become constant. CJ Okoye is definitely one of them. All right, I got to get through this list. I don't want this video to get too long. We're going to kind of go through some of these kind of fast. I've talked a lot about Zion Johnson. Zion Johnson may end up being one of the biggest leap players on this list. And what I mean by that is they go from a good season to, wow, look at this guy in 2024. I think in terms of what he brings to the table as a first-round pick, as I'll say an above average at this point guard in the NFL, is exactly what Jim Harbaugh is looking for. Like, this guy's good. Let's make him great. And Zion Johnson, to me, exactly what you're looking for in this offense, has already transformed himself into a Jim Harbaugh weapon. You take a look at more recent photos of him. This dude has hit the gym with Captain America and the Hulk and the rest of the Avengers. This dude is absolutely huge. Okay, and in terms of what you're trying to accomplish and bullying your opponent and utilizing that power, I think Zion's going to shock a lot of people this year. Zion could end up, you know, skyrocketing to the top 10 of his position, which I don't think he was last season. I do think that he could definitely make himself known among the league as a really good guard behind the Jim Harbaugh effect. Another guy that I think could see a little bit of improvement after moving to his natural position of guard last season. He was really good a couple of years ago playing at tackle in lieu of Rashawn Slater. Then he moved to guard and he was okay, right? He wasn't crazy. That flash was constant when he was at tackle. It was there. If Jim Harbaugh can take a flash and turn it into a constant, it exists in Jamari Sawer. Despite the position move back, whatever you want to call it, I think Jamari Sawer, who right now might be a swing guard, I don't know, just a backup offensive lineman that can play everywhere, again, could just make for a very deep, talented Chargers offensive line position, because it's not just the starters, guys, that are important to a Jim Harbaugh team. It's also the depth. You got to keep that in mind. Where was he? The poor man. This guy here could end up being a pretty big and important piece of the puzzle, right? Because depth is very important for a football team in general, but for offensive line in particular, it's really hard to come into because it's such a premium position that's already, so hard to keep on your team, to overpay, to draft high. Like, to find quality backups is difficult. And right now, the Chargers have some really, really good depth, right? Excuse me, was that Jamari Sawer was here? We were talking about, this is the photo of Jordan McFadden. So we'll say right here. Okay, we'll say this. So mess up by the director. It's okay. Jamari Sawer could see a very big leap. Don't know why I didn't even see the 71. The other guy in terms of depth that I wanted to highlight too is Jordan McFadden, who has been talked up by Jim Harbaugh, right? That could be huge. I was excited about the idea of Jordan McFadden. The dude was big. He was strong. I think Jim Harbaugh probably loves him because he does fit that big bully kind of offensive lineman that he looks for. And he's definitely going to be nice if the Chargers can get something out of him in terms of depth. Okay, so the Chargers, I would say, look very, very good in terms of starters. From left to right, Slater, Zion, Bozeman all of a sudden looks good. Right at guard, you got Trey Hipkins now, and at right tackle, Joe Alt. Like, those starters look great. And then the depth, which can be equally as important right now to me, being Alex Leatherwood, Jordan McFadden, Jamari Sawer. These guys also very impressive and could remain very impressive. Now, that guy I did mention at guard, Trey Hipkins, this is one of the more intriguing offensive line narratives that I've ever seen as a Chargers fan. The down and then rock bottom player at tackle, Chargers fans wanted him gone, to a very decent right tackle, I will say average, above average, to now switching to guard and receiving. I feel like every interview I hear is talking about how great Trey Hipkins is and how awesome his transition has been and how he's blowing up expectations. I'm so excited to see that translate, because the biggest reason for that, for me at least, is that he's going to be playing side by side with Joe Alt. And in between him, is Bradley Bozeman. He's got some good pieces next to him. And if his talent does translate, and if he does be what everybody's saying he is, the Chargers running from the right side, the protection from the right side, it's going to be so crazy good. I'm excited to see the transition. I'm excited to see the result. I'm excited to see Trey Hipkins finally find the success that everyone was kind of hoping that he would reach at some point as a project player. He did get the extension. He is on the team for another year even after this season. If we can find huge success at guard, right on, man. That is exactly what you want to see. And then finally, maybe one of the biggest players, I said this a couple times, on the list is going to be Will Dissly. This is a player that was recently highlighted by Matt Money Smith, right? On the Chargers podcast on their channel. I saw an excerpt of it on Twitter talking about one of his favorite sneaky players of the upcoming season being Will Dissly. And it's because Will Dissly, who, mind you, already great player for the Chargers to pick up in the offseason. This is one of the very best run-blocking tight ends in the entire league. I think he was like top 3, right? Insanely good. I think he may have been number 2. I think maybe the only one above him was like guys like George Kittle, right? The best run-blocking tight end in the league. Already great situation for him and for Jim Harbaugh on his team, right? But then you add to the fact that what Matt Money Smith was saying, he's been largely underutilized as a receiver throughout his career. More specifically, last year, I think a lot of people fresh off the idea of what him and Geno Smith have been trying to create in terms of repertoire. They've also got Noah Fant out there, so it's hard to get a lot of targets for a guy like Will Dissly. But it sounds like Will Dissly can be a very, very good receiver as well. Net Money mentioning that there are several, opportunities where Will Dissly is open. He's out there, down deep, on the seam route or whatever, and Gino's just not going to throw it his way. I think Justin Herbert would. And I think Will Dissly, and this is kind of a reason why I said, Hayden Hurst is number one for right now. I do view Hayden Hurst as the best receiving tight end on the roster right now. And I think he'll end up being a tight end one for the whole season. But there is a world, right? There is a world where Will Dissly starts going crazy in terms of his receiving. If he's a complete tight end, you'll see him on the field every single snap if you could, right? I'm excited to see what he does as a receiver. I think Jim Harbaugh and the opportunity that will be provided to the tight end position will see more Will Dissly opportunity. And I think Will Dissly is going to shock a lot of people too. There's guys that I think are going to shock a lot of people. I think the biggest names on this list for me are Zion Johnson, Will Dissly, and Bradley Bozeman, and Ben Mason. I think those are the biggest names on this list for me. And I think the Chargers are on a very good trajectory to get the most out of the positions that Jim Harbaugh has been so known to elevate in the past. Now, to finally wrap up this video, the sneaky mentions that I had to put on here, okay? These aren't the trenches, but that's why they're the honorable mentions. Because of these positions, you're going to see the entire team benefit, but none more than a couple positions on offense. Running back is going to see a huge uptick this season. Yes, because of the handoffs that we'll definitely see. You're going to see more opportunities and carries for the running back. That's for freaking sure. But the quality of blocking, the quality of running is also super important here. And I said this on my stream a few days ago. It's not good enough to run the football. You have to run the football well. And the Chargers have not been running the football well for years. All of a sudden, something's going to happen that Chargers fans aren't used to. We're going to start running the football well. We're going to be a good running football team. The blocking is going to make damn well sure of that. Like, that's going to be a huge focal point of the Chargers' identity going forward. And the line is going to benefit these guys, including the man you see on this photo right here that Jim Harbaugh is coaching up, Isaiah Spiller, who's largely been labeled a bust. There is a shot that he doesn't even make the roster. I think he does. But even guys like him are going to look like a completely different version of themselves because of the blocking provided. It's going to be huge. It's going to be massive. That's why J.K. Dobbins stemmed such a huge chance to transform himself into, in my opinion, like a top 10 running back in the NFL behind the Chargers offensive line. That's why Gus Edwards could be one of the highest scoring running backs in the NFL behind the Chargers offensive line. That's why Kamani Vidal, right, could end up being one of the best rookie running backs in the NFL despite being drafted way later, than the guys like Jonathan Brooks. It's exciting to think. And lastly but not least, Justin Herbert. This is the biggest beneficiary of the Chargers' next level trenches upgrade. This is going to make Justin Herbert shine. A lot of people, myself included, hoping for Malik Neighbors, hoping for Marvin Harrison, hoping for Brock Bowers, the flashy weapons that really get you excited as a football fan because, wow, that's fun to watch. But really, where it does count, where you take a talent like Justin Herbert and make it explode, is when you give him time, when you bring him protection and space. Justin, and honestly, tempo as well. The Chargers having a run game, solid play action, protection, all of this stuff is going to take Justin Herbert as a perceived, we'll say, top 10 quarterback in the league, which sucks. I hate saying that. I hate having those words come out my mouth. But you guys are on social media as well. You know what the general NFL thinks, right? And although it be, Justin Herbert, a top 5 quarterback, in stone for me and for Chargers fans, he's largely viewed as a top 10. I think this is going to really elevate his name, elevate his talent to the next level where he is freaking sure to be a top 5 quarterback. The quality of play you're about to see out of Justin Herbert, the protection, it's going to be next level. It really is. The Chargers offense is going to benefit greatly from that. And I'll even say that, I didn't grab his photo, but I'll even say that about the quarterback of the defense in Derwin James. You're going to see some crazy elevation out of these guys because of what's being built up front. And that is why the Jim Harbaugh system has been successful everywhere he's been. When the crowds are screaming neighbors, when the fans want you to pass, Jim Harbaugh has a rock-steady foundation, a rock-steady anchor that says we are building the trenches and we are doing what works and what has found success everywhere I've been. I'm not going to shake that for a flashy player. You guys know what I'm saying. Jim Harbaugh is nothing but consistent.
He's found consistent success everywhere, and this is one of the biggest reasons why he's found success everywhere is because of the attention to detail and the attention to detail on the offensive and defensive lines. The trench play, super important. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. Hey, everybody who's made it to the end of this particular video, bravo. Bravo. You guys are Chargers fans, you're football fans, you're fans of, success when, in the fog of war that is hype, that we want all of these skill position players and we want videos revolving around, who's going to be the next big wide receiver and the next big quarterback things and all this kind of stuff. Us being here as Chargers fans, appreciating and getting hyped up about the offensive and defensive lines, that is next level to me. Well, guys, thank you again so much for joining me. This has been The Director. Hit us up with the like and sub on your way out. If you did enjoy this content, we'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Oh, guys, can't wait to see Joe Alt in action, man. It's going to be big.